Welcome back. In April 2025, the U.S. stock market lost $6.6 trillion in 48 hours. That's more than the entire GDP of Japan, more than the GDP of Germany and France combined, gone in 2 days. Every news channel ran some version of the same headline. Trillions wiped off the markets. Financial anchors used words like bloodbath and meltdown. X, formerly Twitter, was on fire. Reddit was in full meltdown mode. And every single time this happens, millions of people ask the exact same question. Where did the money go? Did someone collect it? Is there some hidden vault where lost trillions pile up? Did it evaporate? Did Jeff Bezos find it behind his couch cushions? Spoiler, there is no vault. There is no heist. No one accidentally left $6.6 trillion in their other pants. That money didn't go anywhere because it was never really there. Now, that sounds like a cop-out, like the kind of answer someone gives when they don't actually know the answer, but it is the real answer. In the next few minutes, we'll walk through exactly what market value actually is, how one single trade can erase billions in seconds, and why the number on your screen was never really money to begin with. We'll look at how this has played out across every major crash in the last 100 years, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why entire economies can gain and lose trillions overnight without a single physical dollar moving. And more importantly, why that still hurts real people in very real ways. And to understand it all, we need to start with an uncomfortable truth about the number on your brokerage app. Every company on the stock market has a number attached to it called market capitalization, market cap for short. It's supposed to tell you what the company is worth. Here's how it's calculated. Take any company, multiply the current price of one share by the total number of shares that exist. That is the market cap. Apple has about 15 billion shares. If each share trades at $270, Apple's market cap is $4 trillion. Simple multiplication. But here's the catch. That share price, the number being multiplied across billions of shares, it was set by the last trade. One buyer, one seller, one transaction. That's it. Let me show you why that matters. Say a company has 1 billion shares outstanding. Yesterday, the stock closed at $100 a share. Therefore, the market cap is $100 billion. However, today, one nervous investor sells a single share at $80. Just one share, one trade, and the market cap just dropped by $20 billion. Because every single one of those billion shares is now priced at 80 instead of 100. Even though 999,999,999 of those shares didn't change hands, nobody sold them, nobody bought them, their owners probably didn't even check their phones, but on paper, the company is now worth $20 billion less. This is the marginal buyer principle. One transaction at the edge of the market reprices everything. The tail wags the entire dog. It's like if your neighbor sold their house for $2 million, and now Zillow says your house is worth $2 million. You didn't renovate, you didn't even mow the lawn, but congratulations, you are now a paper millionaire. Don't spend it all in one place, because you can't. So market cap is not a pile of cash sitting in a bank. It's a guess, an opinion about what all shares would be worth if you could sell every single one at today's price, which you can't. Because the moment you tried to sell all of them at once, the price would collapse under the weight of the selling. Want proof that all of this is theoretical? In the late 1990s, the New York Stock Exchange had about 3,000 listed companies with a combined market cap of around $15 trillion. Sounds like a lot, except the total U.S. money supply at the time was only about $6 trillion. The stock market was valued at 2.5 times all the actual dollars in America. Every dollar would have needed to be spent 2.5 times over just to buy everything on the market. That gap is the proof. Market cap is not real money. It's confidence expressed as math. So when a crash happens and trillions disappear, no cash is destroyed, no money is burned. The guess changed, the opinion shifted, and the math updated. This is not new. This exact same pattern has repeated over and over and over again for more than a century. Trillions vanish in the headlines, people panic, and then the market recovers every single time. Here's how it looked. 1929, people were buying stocks with borrowed money, 10% down, 90% on margin. When the bubble popped, the Dow dropped 89%. It took 25 years to recover. An entire generation waited. 1987, Black Monday. The Dow fell 22.6% in a single day. That's still the record for the biggest one-day percentage drop ever. The culprit? Early computer algorithms that automatically sold when prices fell, which triggered more selling, which triggered more algorithms. A digital panic spiral before most people even owned a computer. Computers crashing the stock market in 1987, and we thought giving AI access to trading was a good idea. 2000, the dot-com bust. Investors poured money into any company with a .com in its name. Pets.com went from IPO to bankruptcy in 268 days. The Nasdaq lost nearly 80% of its value. But here's the twist. While tech stocks were collapsing, old-school companies were doing just fine. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway gained over 26% in the year 2000. The crash wasn't everywhere. It was concentrated where the speculation was. 2008, the big one. Banks had been packaging bad mortgages into fancy financial products and selling them to everyone. When the housing market collapsed, it took the entire financial system with it. The S&P 500 fell 57% from its peak. It took 4 years to recover. 2020, COVID. The S&P 500 dropped 34% in about a month. Fastest bear market in history, but also the fastest recovery. 5 months later, new all-time highs. The Fed flooded the system with money, and markets bounced back as if nothing happened. 2025 had its own setback, but we'll discuss that later in detail. Notice the pattern. Every crash has a different trigger. War, fraud, disease, trade policy, algorithms. But every crash shares one thing in common. The market recovered. Every single time. The market always recovers is comforting advice. Unless, say, you're 85 years old and your retirement fund just got halved. Then always feels a bit more like eventually. Maybe? Who knows? Now, the timelines are wildly different with all of these crashes. 3 months versus 25 years is not a small range. And that is exactly where this story gets more complicated, because the money was never real is technically correct, but it misses something important. Here's the part most people get wrong. If the money was never real, then crashes shouldn't matter, right? That's what most people conclude, and they're dangerously wrong. Crashes cause real economic damage through something called the wealth effect. Plain English, when people feel richer, they spend more. When they feel poorer, they spend less. And spending is what keeps the economy alive. Think about it in your own life. Your portfolio is up 30%. You feel good. You book that vacation. You finally upgrade your phone. You go out to dinner on Tuesday for no reason. Now, imagine your portfolio just dropped 30%. That vacation gets postponed. The phone can wait. Tuesday dinner becomes leftovers. You didn't actually lose cash from your checking account, but your behavior changed. And when millions of people change their behavior at the same time, the economy feels it. Now here's the scary part. Consumer spending makes up almost 70% of U.S. GDP. It is the engine. And the top 10% of American households now account for roughly half of all consumer spending. That number used to be 36% just 3 decades ago. It's climbed to 50%. So the people most exposed to the stock market are the same people driving the economy with their spending. When their portfolios crash, they pull back. When they pull back, companies earn less. When companies earn less, stock prices drop further, which makes those same people pull back even more. That is a feedback loop, and it can spiral from a market correction into a full-blown recession. So basically, the economy is running on the shopping habits of people who own a lot of stocks. Totally stable system, right? Nothing to worry about. Nothing to see here. Paper losses stay paper losses as long as you don't sell. That is true. But some people have no choice. Retirees who are drawing down their 401k every month, they need the cash now, not in 5 years when the market might recover, so they wind up selling at the bottom, and that loss is permanent. Margin traders. This is exactly what happened in 1929. People borrowed heavily to buy stocks. When prices fell, brokers issued margin calls demanding more cash. If you couldn't pay, your shares were force sold at whatever the market offered. Paper losses became real losses overnight. Fortunes evaporated in hours. Pension funds that need to pay retirees today, hedge funds facing investor redemptions, companies that pledged their own stock as collateral for loans, none of these people can just wait it out. After the April 2025 crash, 401k trading activity spiked to its highest level since the early days of COVID in March 2020. Most of that money moved into bonds and money market funds. Safer, yes, but it also meant millions of people crystallized their losses. They sold low. And here's the important detail. The money those people lost didn't vanish into thin air. It was transferred. Someone sold them a stock at $100 a month ago. That seller walked away with real cash. Now the stock is worth $50. The buyer of that trade is holding the loss. The money didn't disappear. It moved. It just moved before the crash happened. April 2025 is the perfect case study because everything happened in fast forward. April 2nd, Trump announced sweeping tariffs, 10% across the board on nearly all imports. Chinese goods hit with rates up to 54%, the highest tariff levels in over a century. In 48 hours, $6.6 trillion evaporated from U.S. markets. The Dow lost 4,000 points. The NASDAQ dropped 11%. The VIX, Wall Street's fear gauge, spiked to 45, its highest reading since the pandemic crash. Then on April 9th, Trump announced a 90-day pause on most of those tariffs. One announcement, one podium, one sentence, basically. The S&P 500 surged 9.52% in a single day. That is the third biggest since World War II. The Dow jumped nearly 3,000 points, gaining 7.87% on the day. By June 27th, the S&P 500 hit a brand new all-time high, higher than before the crash. Full recovery, new record in under 3 months. So ask yourself this. Did $6.6 trillion physically leave millions of bank accounts in April, float around in some financial shadow realm for a few weeks, and then politely return to those same accounts in June? If your money could leave and come back on its own like that, you wouldn't need a financial advisor. You'd need a priest, or maybe a dog trainer. Nothing real changed. The same companies existed. The same factories were running. The same people were working. The products were still on the shelves. The only thing that shifted was a number on a screen. Twice. Once down once up. Both times because of what one person said at a podium. So where does the money go when the market crashes? Nowhere. Market value is a guess. It's the price the last buyer paid, multiplied across every share that exists. When confidence shifts, the guess changes. The math updates. A new number appears on the screen. No cash was created on the way up, and no cash was destroyed on the way down. That doesn't mean crashes are harmless. The wealth effect is real. Forced sellers take real permanent losses. Confidence spirals can drag entire economies into recession. The pain is real. But the trillions that vanished from the headlines, they were never cash in the first place. They were confidence wearing a price tag. Crashes don't destroy money. They destroy confidence. And confidence was the only thing holding the price up to begin with. Now, when it comes to U.S. debt, the situation is even more bizarre. The U.S. literally can never repay its debt. But how does the system keep running? The answer is complicated. I break it all down in the video on the screen. Click to watch and find out how the U.S. handles its debt crisis.